Good evening, everyone. Welcome to 8.3 Energy of Motion. In tonight's lesson, we're going to look at basic vocabulary words that have to do with motion, how to start and how to stop motion, and everything in between. I also want you to go ahead and look at the cartoon that's on the very first slide right here, why science teachers should not be given playground duty. Go ahead and look over that, and I want you to kind of think about that during the whole lesson. And at the very end, I'm going to ask you why, and then we're going to discuss it in class tomorrow. So go ahead and look at this cartoon as we go through our slides tonight. All right, boys and girls, we are ready to get started. Now, before we do get started, I want to make sure everybody has everything that they're going to need in order to be successful on tonight's lesson. So you are going to need your science vocabulary folder with plenty of paper, and you're also going to need your science interactive notebook. So go ahead and get those two items out if you have not done so already. Therefore, we can go ahead and get started. And again, science interactive folder is no more. It is your Science Interactive notebook. That was just a typo. So again, Science Vocabulary folder and your Science Interactive notebook. Go ahead and get those two items out and get ready to write in them. Now, you will not need to do note cards at home. That is something that we provide you time in class for. So don't waste the time at home when you can be doing other things. Just go ahead and make sure you are prepared and ready to write down those note cards the next day in class, and we will give you time to do that. So go ahead and get those items out if you need to. And you may pause me before we move on. All right, now that we have our Science Interactive notebook out, go ahead and write down these 3 essential questions we're going to be discussing tonight. The first one is, what makes things move in different ways? The second one is, what are some different forms of energy? And the third and final essential question is, how can you make work easier? So go ahead and write those 3 questions down. Remember to leave room to answer your questions. Or I know some students write it on the second page. Totally up to you, whatever you'd like to do. All right, our first vocab word of the night is simple machine. A simple machine is a machine with few moving parts that makes it easier to do work. For example, there are 6 different simple machines we're going to cover this year in class. An inclined plane, level, wedge, wheel and axle, pulley, and screws. So these simple machines make work easier for people, whether you're lifting an item or trying to move an item. All of these simple machines will make the job easier for you, especially if it's a heavier item. So go ahead and write down this definition. You may use one of my pictures to do your picture, because that is an example of a simple machine. So go ahead and complete all of your Instagram before we move on. All right, our second word of the night is compound machine. And there are some examples of compound machines down on the right-hand side of your screen. A compound machine is a combination of 2 or more simple machines. And we just had the definition of simple machine back on the very first slide. For example, if you look at the scissors right here, you'll notice 2 different simple machines. The first simple machine is the wedge right here. And the second simple machine is the lever. So those are 2 simple machines put together to make a compound machine. All right, our third word for tonight is force. A force is any push or pull. Now, if you go ahead and look at my example on the bottom, both of these students are pushing the ball in the same direction. Therefore, the ball's not going to move because they are forcing it to kind of stay in the middle right there to stay at rest. Our next word is friction. Friction is a force between surfaces that slows objects down or stops them. If you see, this gentleman here on the left is pushing this other gentleman here. However, if you look at the bottom where his shoes are, you see that his shoes and the ground are causing friction, hence is why the smoke is happening. They're causing friction for him to slow down or almost stop moving. Our next word is gravity. And yes, you have seen this word before, but I would like for you to go ahead and write it down again so you'll have it with your energy notes. But we just did space, so I know you guys understand what gravity is, but just go ahead and write it down again for me. Gravity is a force of attraction between 2 objects. If you look at the example here, the gentleman is sitting underneath the tree. However, when the apple falls out of the tree, it doesn't stay put. It actually is forced to the ground by gravity. So the apple falls from the tree to his head and then eventually to the ground. All right, our last word of the night is a little bit tricky, but I'm going to do my best to explain it to you after I give you the exact definition. All right, so the last word is inertia. Inertia is the tendency of an object to remain in motion or to stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. So the best example I can think of inertia is pretend you're traveling in a car and the driver, whoever the driver is, has to slam on brakes because maybe an animal runs out or maybe something is in the road and they have to go around it. But if they slam on brakes, you jolt forward just a little bit because you have your seatbelt on. That seatbelt is going to hold you in place. So when you jolt forward, that's inertia because your car is traveling at a speed of maybe 15, 20 miles an hour. And when the car keeps going forward and automatically has to stop, your seatbelt holds you in place. And that's how inertia happens, is when you get held down by your seatbelt, even though the car and your body kind of wants to keep moving forward. So that's the better explanation of inertia than the definition. And it kind of creates a picture in your mind of what inertia actually is. And again, we're going to talk about it in class, so don't feel afraid that if you're still a little confused, we are going to go over it a few more times in class. And let's go ahead and close out the lesson by answering our essential questions. What makes things move in different ways? We decided that forces makes things start moving. That should be start moving, stop moving, speed up, slow down, or change direction. So anytime you have a ball coming towards you, you have to have a force, whether it's your hand, your leg, your foot, or maybe a glove, or even the grass, that has to cause friction in order for it to stop, slow down, or change directions. What are some different forms of energy? Energy exists in many different forms, and we are going to talk about a lot of those over the next few weeks. But one form we learned tonight is the energy of motion. And the last question is, how can you make work easier? Well, the very first slide we talked about was simple machines. And simple machines make things work easier. There are 6 different types of simple machines. And again, we're going to discuss those throughout the next week or so in our lessons. So go ahead and make sure you have a good understanding of these essential questions. Before you come to class tomorrow, we're going to discuss them a little bit further. And the last slide of the evening actually has a question on it. The question is, why shouldn't science teachers be given playground duty? Well, if this science teacher lets this student go, he is going to bump this student, and then he is going to bump this student, and then so on and so on, kind of like a pendulum. But he's going to use his force of motion to probably go back and forth and back and forth. And unless there was some friction, which could be the other students, that probably would not stop for a good while. So that's probably why science teachers should not be given playground duty, although I think Miss Pratt, Mr. Davidson, and I kind of have a little bit of better handle on that. We probably would not do that on the swings. So this is just a fun comic for you guys to think about. And I'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a good evening, everyone.